Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast, the week starting Sunday, July 21st. I'm Mark Sponsler, and I'll be hosting tonight's presentation. We'll be talking short-term forecasts, that is the jet stream, what's going on surface level pressure, wave models for the South Pacific Ocean. Then we'll go midterm, looking at the MJO, El Nino, and then of course long-term, maybe beyond that, what's going on up to 10 or 15 years out, if you can believe that. All right, let's get into the details. As usual, we start looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, and unfortunately, we don't see a whole lot going on. A little bit of a gale here in the far southeast Pacific generating 22-foot seas, but aimed at Patagonia, that's about it. Cutoff low here in the mid-central southeast Pacific, doing nothing, and other than that, a rather calm pattern. All the energy is off in the Indian Ocean for the time being. All right, let's get into it. We'll start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, that is somewhere where the jet is pushing off to the northeast. And we're not really seeing it. Here's the southern branch of the jet. It's running pretty much zonally, that is flat from west to east, way down south, down like it's 68 south. The ice line's up anywhere from 63 up to about 60 south. It's the dead of winter in the southern hemisphere. The jet needs to move north of ice to get to allow winds to get traction on the ocean surface. We're not seeing any of that. All the energy is in the northern branch of the jet, and that doesn't really do anything in terms of swell production. So for the moment, things are not looking particularly positive. We put this into motion. We see, hey, here comes a developing bit of a trough maybe on Tuesday, lifting gently northeast. So that would help create a clockwise flow aloft, and that's the hallmark of low pressure, both aloft and down at the surface. That helps generate winds. Winds generate seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell, and swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So a little bit of a trough here off on Tuesday night or maybe Wednesday, but in the very far southeast Pacific. If anything, it'll help support low pressure, maybe generating swell pushing up into Peru, Chile, maybe Central America, and maybe some sideband energy for California. I mean, at least there's some decent winds. Was that 120 knot winds, but nothing really outstanding. Notice this ridge that pushing south. When you get this split jet stream like this, that creates high pressure in the upper atmosphere, and that does nothing for generating swell. You see this as we get into Friday and Saturday in the far southwest Pacific, just really nothing going on. And then maybe as we get into Saturday night and Sunday, that's almost a week out, another trough tries to get organized here, but it's very weak. Winds are only, 110 knots. Just not really doing a whole lot. And there we are, 180 hours out. Now you're going, why is all this happening? The surf has been insane. It's been great for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Well, yeah, we are in the active phase of the MJO, and you know how fixated we are on the MJO, because the MJO dictates what goes on in the jet stream. The jet stream dictates what goes on down at the surface in terms of storms, and the storms, of course, are what generate swell. So when the MJO turns inactive, and that's exactly what's going on, it tends to stomp on the jet stream, and the whole house of cards falls apart. All right, let's take a look down at the surface, but we suspect we already know what's going on. And here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds. As expected, a little cutoff low here in the southeast Pacific. Winds 30 knots or something, not really doing anything. And otherwise, high pressure and control of the southwest Pacific, and just nothing of any interest really happening. Another cutoff low is forecast to develop on Monday. This, we'll say east of northern New Zealand, with good winds out of the east here. Remember, clockwise flow in the southern hemisphere is the hallmark of low pressure. That'll make swell pushing towards New Zealand, but doesn't do anything for us. And that continues. See, a bit of a more fetch, we'll say, spraying into this whole area. That's our guess here, looking at that 40, almost 45 knot winds in that little area there, holding into Wednesday. Pretty long-lasting system. Then, remember, that trough starts developing. In fact, let's roll back just a little bit. There we go. It starts on really Tuesday night. Small area, 35 to 40 knot winds building. And in the California swell window, Southern California is about 117 west right there. So actually, maybe some hope from this as Wednesday into maybe Thursday, and then most of the fetch moves out of the California swell window and all aimed to the east, targeting Patagonia, and that's kind of it. Then we continue looking. Another little gale forecast here as we get into Saturday. Right, the ice line, probably right around in here. So yeah, it's over open ocean. Maybe it'll get a little purchase, lifting northeast, but fading out within, what's that, 12 or 13 now? And maybe it actually, look at this, even as we get into Sunday. So maybe there's some hope. Oh, we'd say 5 days out for something starting to develop, and then another week or more before it reaches California, and pretty much east of the Hawaiian swell window, so not a whole lot there. Here we are at 180 hours. High pressure in control, 1 weak little gale, and that's about it. All right, that's our guess. Let's go take a look at the wave models and see what they have to tell us. Now, actually, this is a week ago. We're just looking to see if there was anything that has been generated in terms of swell over the past week since we last did this report, and the reality is we're looking for anything with 25, 26 foot seas. Yeah, this little area here developed on Monday and Tuesday in the far southeast Pacific. There we go, a little bit better as we got into Tuesday morning. What's that, 20, 22, 24, maybe 25 foot seas. And there has been swell generated, so about a week out, we'll say Tuesday. That would be this coming Tuesday, 2 days away. Maybe a little swell, very south angle for Southern California. Maybe up into Northern California, but very minor compared to the swell that we had been seeing for the past 3 weeks. Now here's a real sign. Watch over in here, that gale there. Watch which direction it's heading. Or with 30-foot seas heading right into Antarctica, that is not a good sign. That means there's strong ridging in this area. You really want all your weather systems pushing north or to the northeast. We're not seeing any of that. So then where we are, we're Friday a couple days ago. Yeah, another little gale formed, but it's sinking southwest. That's no good in Saturday. Okay, and here we are current. All right, let's go take a look at the forecast now. Here we are today, and just sort of blasting through. We don't expect to really see anything. There's that gale that's pushing swell towards New Zealand. And what was that, 20, 22, 24, 25 foot seas, maybe, something like that? Oh, there we go, 28, 30 foot seas. Hey, not bad if you're in New Zealand, but we're not. But in the southeast Pacific, actually, let's go back just a little bit. Here we go. Into Wednesday morning, again, this gale with, what's that, 20, 22, 24, barely 26 foot seas. Oh, 28 foot seas, and in the Southern California swell window, 30 foot, 32 foot seas, maybe 33 feet. Yeah, there we go, right down there. 33 foot seas. So that could make some 17, we'll say 16 to 17 second period swell. Traveling north, if it happens, that's, sometime on Wednesday, so maybe about a week from this coming Wednesday. Maybe there'll actually be a little bit more than barely rideable swell, but the whole system moves out of the Southern California swell window, targeting, of course, Peru. Central America, if you're going there, you're doing well. Even Mexico, doing okay. But for those that are stuck in the United States, not so much luck. Then finally, 150 hours out, another weak little system. This is Saturday night. That's almost a week from now. Not believable. 26 foot seas. Little tiny area, 30 foot seas. You know what? Can't be too picky. Take what you can get. At least there's something on the charts now. A week ago, it wasn't even looking this good. So there's some hope. Also, notice the ice line here. Here we go. Okay, 61 south there. 60, what's that, about 63 south. See, now, what was that? In June, late May, the ice line was way down here, around 68 or something like that. So as you get into winter, the ice moves further north. That covers up the ocean. You have to have ice-free waters for winds to blow and get purchase on the ocean surface to generate swell. And so it becomes more difficult the deeper into summer you get in terms of being able to generate swell, because you just lose a whole bunch of aerial coverage just due to cold temperatures and ice. So that's where we are. This is not unusual. So then we go looking for wind swell. That's the other option. So right now, Sunday, light northwest winds off the North California coast, 15 knots. It's not really doing anything to generate wind swell. A little bit of eddy flow along the coast. That is, it's like there's low pressure here heat low inland, and when it starts building, pushing out over the coast here, that actually produces south winds along at least the central and up into northern California coast. Sometimes clean, rather than having nuking northwest winds raking the coast and whitecaps, you get a little bit of a break because it's generally pretty light in the 5 to 10 knot range. Relative to Hawaii, no real easterly fetch east of the islands. You want to see at least continuous 15 knot winds blowing into the hot Hawaiian Islands. We're not seeing that today. So no real wind swell. But as we get into Monday, you see building area fetch there pushing into the islands. Maybe some wind swell. Relative to California, nothing significant. Building area fetch, so what's that? 3, 6, 9, 1,200 nautical miles of 15 knot winds blowing directly at exposed east shores of the Hawaiian Islands. So maybe a little bit of wind swell as we get into Monday night. And there you go, looking even better as we get into Tuesday morning with up to 20 knot winds. Bit of a gradient starting to build here along the California coast. Really close to shore, 20 knot winds, but yeah, get some wind swell from that. And it builds even more as we get into Wednesday with 25 knot winds over Cape Mendocino. So building wind swell for California on Wednesday and wind swell for east-facing shores of the Hawaiian Islands. Notice this low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. In July, it's hangover probably from last winter's weak El Nino. The high pressure off the coast here of California, what's that? About a 1026, 1027 millibar high. That's what's generating the east winds. High pressure, clockwise circulation around it. That's what generates the flow, produces some wind. So at least there's wind swell potential. We get into Thursday, pretty much the same deal for California. Not quite an eddy flow developing yet along the coast. East winds, 15 knots, backing out for the Hawaiian Islands. Still wind swell, but fading. Then we get into Friday morning. Well, fetch starts dying along the California coast. Starts fading relative to Hawaii, getting much shallower there. So we get into Saturday, maybe a little bit of building fetch. High pressure starting to consolidate, taking control of the Gulf of Alaska. So that adds some hope. Wind swell, we'll say modest wind swell for California and for Hawaii. Get into Sunday, and here we are a week out. Rebuilding fetch for all locations, high pressure. So during La Nina years in the winter, when you get stronger than normal trades, that's driven by high pressure. La Nina, you really want low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska in winter months to generate swell. But when you see high pressure, if you saw a pattern like this in even December, January sort of thing, that would not be a good thing to notice. But the reason we mention this is long term, we suspect this is what we might see some of this coming winter, but we could be wrong. All right, let's move on. All right, part 2 of the presentation, talking long-term outlook. And by long-term, the MJO, that's like 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out. What's going on with it? We think it's moving to the inactive phase, and that sort of sets the tone for what's to come for the next month. And then even out beyond that, El Nino, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. El Nino, La Nina, we don't know. We're going to find out, or at least we think we are. So first, let's take a look at the MJO. And one way we look for evidence of the active phase of the MJO, that's what we're interested in. The active phase of the MJO helps drive more energy into the jet stream, both in summer and winter months, and that in turn helps feed gale development. So we see winds out of the east over the East Pacific. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. This is the equator. That is New Guinea there. The date line's right there. So this is the West Pacific. This is the area we're really interested in, what we call the Kelvin wave generation area, because if you have west winds in this area, from an area of 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, so draw a line there to there, and down to there, sort of a box. And if you see west winds, look at that, actual west winds, that's a good sign. Okay, but anyway, in the far East Pacific, we see east winds, trades, that's normal. They make it to about a point south of Hawaii, then they die. And they actually reverse direction. That's pretty interesting, especially given what's been going on, what we've been discussing for past couple of weeks. We'll get more into that. Anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. Yeah, you can have east winds, but is that normal? Well, these winds are a hair bit. You see the arrows coming out of the east, a little bit stronger than normal. So we'll call that enhanced trades until you get to a point south of Hawaii. Then the trades basically die, and it's the equivalent of westerly winds because, well, and you actually have westerly winds in the Kelvin wave generation area. So that Why do we call it the Kelvin wave generation area? Because if you get westerly winds there, they take warm water, 30-degree temperatures right there, that's 30 degrees Celsius, start pushing it off to the east, but not on the surface. Falls down below the equator, traverses the equator in a ball under about 100 meters below the ocean's surface, and eventually it'll erupt, if it's strong enough and has enough momentum, off of Ecuador, form a warm pool there, and then that warm pool gets carried across the equator, and that is the hallmark of El Nino. But it takes several Kelvin waves. They have to be strong enough, they have to have enough velocity, and there has to be enough warm water over here to support their formation. So we have what appears to be the active phase of the MJO. We have westerly winds. We have warm water. Maybe a Kelvin wave's getting formed. Hard to believe, but maybe. What's been going on the past 5 days in terms of westerly winds? Well, okay, so here's South America, Central America, New Guinea there, Kelvin wave generation. Oh, equator right there, date line there. So right around in there, that's the Kelvin wave generation area. You see the arrows coming from the west, orange shading, west anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area. This was July 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, fading, here we go, fading a little bit on the 19th, but we've had a run of westerly winds. Let's go take a look a little deeper here. All right, so here's a different kind of chart. The whole planet on one chart, date line runs right up the middle, Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks. Those of you that have been here before know the drill, okay? So we're looking from up this line and up this line. That's the Kelvin wave generation area, and this is back in time here. We're looking for red anomalies in this area. That would be westerly anomalies. We see a Kelvin wave or something, not a Kelvin wave, but a westerly wind burst or an active phase of the MJO was developing, we'll say, on the date line, beginning of July, continued the whole month of July. Now, we had surf pretty much the whole month of July, too. That's no coincidence. So when you get these westerly anomalies, they feed the jet stream, they feed the storm track, and that in turn makes the surf that we've been riding. But you can see, here's today's date, and look at the forecast. We have maybe one more day of westerly anomalies, something like that, and then you start seeing easterly anomalies developing in the Kelvin wave generation area. That in turn will shut down the jet stream, if it hadn't already, which it already has. We've seen that. And that in turn will probably knock down our potential for swell generation. All right, digging a little bit deeper. So what are we looking at here? Outgoing long wave radiation. Okay, that's a fancy word for cloud cover. If you have a lot of cloud cover, blue, like there, is negative anomalies. That means less sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. That means a lot of clouds. That means low pressure. That means probably the active phase of the MJO. Unfortunately, the orange is positive anomalies, more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. That is probably not a good sign. That means the inactive phase of the MJO. And this is the CA model. It's a statistical model, 2 different types of models, statistical and dynamic. Anyway, for today, looking like the inactive phase of the MJO is setting up in the West Pacific, supposed to continue 5 days out. Supposedly, this model has a week from now, the inactive phase completely disappearing, and the active phase materializes in the West Pacific 2 weeks out. But the dynamic model, the GEFS model, that's the main U.S. model, not nearly as rosy a picture. It says the inactive phase in control and basically staying in control for the next 2 weeks. And typically, the MJO is not so variable that it disappears after a week, or if it does, it comes right back however it was before. So this is the more likely scenario. Probably 2 weeks at least of the inactive phase of the MJO, which means no real support for storm development down in the southern hemi, or you get sort of these sporadic weirdo kind of storms. But what it does mean is high pressure builds in the Gulf of Alaska, and you get wind swell, and wind swell is better than no swell, so we'll take it. All right, phase diagram charts, another way of looking at the MJO. Assume you're looking down on the North Pole. The MJO moves from west to east from the Indian Ocean, over the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. It goes round and round and round. Inactive phase on half the chart, active phase on the other half. In this case, the heavy dot's where the active phase is. The closer it is to this circle, the weaker it is. You really want to see your active phase out here somewhere, but no. A very weak active phase in the west Indian Ocean. The forecast for the next 2 weeks, yeah, one member of this model says making it into the West Pacific. The other two saying stuck in the Indian Ocean for the next 2 weeks. These are statistic models. The dynamic model says the same thing. Stuck in the Indian Ocean. Very weak. So at least 2 weeks of inactive phase on the other half of the planet, which is where we are, where we need the active phase to be in the West Pacific. So no hope from this model. This is the upper level model. You've seen this before. Basically, the greens are areas favorable for precipitation. One would assume that to be the active phase of the MJO. The oranges, unfavorable for precipitation, the inactive phase of the MJO. So it looks like the active phase is in the far east Pacific and moving out in by the end of July. Inactive phase in control, making its way the whole way across and not out of the Pacific until, what is that, August 20th? So basically a month. Don't like that. Behind that, the active phase forms yesterday. It was supposed to be a lot stronger. Now today's model looking weaker, but developing in the West Pacific, let's say August 10th. So that's when we'll start getting some traction. And then the whole way through August into the end of August, maybe even September. That looks like the sweet spot. So we'll say the August time frame. And then the CFS model, this goes out a month. All right, let's see how it correlates. Pretty much the same deal. So Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks going up. You can see here was our active phase of the MJO in late June into pretty much the whole way till right about now. See all the reds, westerly anomalies. And then here's the last little bit of it right here. You can see westerly anomalies supposedly fading out, little finger of easterly anomalies. Now this is interesting. This model suggests that a week from now, westerly anomalies are supposed to be rebuilding in the Kelvin wave generation area. Now that probably, see that purple thing there? Oh, that's the low pass filter. That suggests low pressure bias in the and you can see it has been over the Kelvin wave generation area for quite a while. That is the hallmark of El Nino, or at least an indicator of El Nino. But notice, it's, according to this model, supposed to fade out about August 10th, something like that. And when that happens, then westerly anomalies, even in the presence of the inactive phase of the MJO, will probably not materialize anymore. They've been doing that a fair amount. Like here's an inactive phase of the MJO back in late May, early June. Even then there was a little bit of westerly anomalies. But we suspect that this westerly wind pattern that's been feeding our storm development is going to start backing off as we get deeper or later into summer, early into fall. And yet one more model. Now this one, again, Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks, but dates are reversed on this one. This is past performance here. We had a pretty good sized westerly wind burst back in May. Then here's our recent, not as strong westerly wind burst in, we'll say, late June, July. Now interesting here, this model suggests westerly anomalies continuing in the Kelvin wave generation area for the foreseeable future, getting steadily weaker but still present, but also easterly anomalies building in the East Pacific. That doesn't do anything in terms of Kelvin wave generation area support, but what it does suggest is that maybe trades will become stronger over the eastern half of the Pacific as we get into the August time frame and into at least the early part of fall. All right, let's overlay the MJO. Here we go. Here's our fading active phase of the MJO, the solid contour, dotted contour, inactive phase of the MJO. Very weak according to this. And then once you get past that, the active phase, a very weak iteration of it, is supposed to continue from like mid-August all the way into October or beyond, but generally a weak MJO pattern. All right, let's overlay the low pass filter. This sort of talks to the real story here. Again, this is basically a low pressure bias in the Kelvin wave generation area, focused on the date line, has been there. It is an indicator of El Nino. And according to this, by August 28th, let's say, that's supposed to fade and the low pressure bias moves to the Indian Ocean. And at some point we would expect to see a dotted contour line show up here. So just like that there. So that's high pressure in the Indian Ocean, low pressure in the Pacific. This was El Nino, but clearly it looks like we're moving towards a La Nina pattern. That means the low pressure bias moves to the Indian Ocean. At some point, high pressure will start building over the Kelvin wave generation area, and that's the end in terms of real support for storm development at a macro level. All right, let's go take a look in the ocean. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is the surface. Go down 100 meters, like 328 feet or something like that. These are the anchor lines on the TAA buoy array. The X's are the sensors on those buoy lines. That's how you get the temperature data. Use a model to fill in the gaps. And what do we see? This is the 30-degree centigrade temperature line in the West Pacific. Pretty much normal. It's been holding steady. The 29-degree isotherm line has been sitting at 160. It's retrograded to 164 or something like that. The 28-degree isotherm was at 150. It's kind of retrograding too. And the 24-degree isotherm was at like 107 or something like that. Now it's to 117. It was even into Ecuador a month ago. So you get the sense that warm temperatures are steadily retreating off to the west. That is a sign of fading El Nino. Now, here's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, we still see warm anomalies, 2 degrees or so under the date line. Almost looks like a building Kelvin wave. Well, we've had nonstop westerly winds, what do we say, from late June to late July. So we wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of a weak Kelvin wave developing, but there's not a whole lot of warm water here. We've been saying this before, and that continues to be the case. A little bit of warm water trying to eke its way into Ecuador, but that's getting steadily smaller too. Cool temperatures below the surface, down 100 meters, probably moving off to the east, probably maybe going to erupt off Ecuador. Hard to say. But, okay, let's look at another model. Here you go. So this shows warm water, yes, to about 160 east and 130 west. Shrinking pool of warm water, supposedly pushing off to the east, but probably not. Cool water really pushing into the east. This is the last of Kelvin wave number 4. Maybe a little piece of Kelvin wave number 5 trying to develop here from the westerly wind anomalies that have happened the past month. But the warm water pattern over the Pacific definitely appears to be in retreat. Here is sea level anomalies. So this is another way of trying to determine where or if warm water is present in the equatorial Pacific. South America there, Australia there, New Guinea there, dateline there, equator there. We see 0 to maybe 5 centimeter anomalies. So this is from the Jason 2, Jason 3 satellites. Strip out all the wave heights, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tides. We're looking for a bump on the ocean surface. We see it there, and that a bump on the ocean surface suggests that there's warm water at depth. So some sort of minimal Kelvin wave probably in this area. You really want to see like 10 or 15 centimeter anomalies to suggest strong warming. The other thing we see is negative anomalies, -5 centimeter anomalies here, suggesting cool water in this area. So, not a La Nina pattern yet, but not really El Nino. At best, a weak Modoki El Nino pattern. And then our favorite chart here, upper ocean heat anomalies. Upper 300 meters the ocean surface. This is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. You can literally see temperatures, warm temperatures moving across the Pacific. This is back October 28th, so almost a year ago. Kelvin wave, I think this was Kelvin wave number 2. And then upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, a bit of cool water. Kelvin wave number 3 in January, February, March, doing its thing, moving into the East Pacific. Upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. Kelvin wave number 4, notice, stronger, not quite as strong, weaker yet in June. And now here's the latest Kelvin wave, if you want to call it that. It's not even a Kelvin wave, just a little bit of warm water moving east. But you get the definite sense that the stronger these are, the greater your potential to move towards El Nino. But you can just see weaker, 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 almost not even present. It just smells like El Nino, and it wasn't even a strong El Nino at that, is dying out, and something new is coming, probably as we get into the fall. Here's a quick look, sea surface temperature anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. We see warm water here. Generally, the area is 5 degrees north and south of the equator. The official El Nino monitoring region from 120 west to 170 west. So over in here, yeah, we see light warm water, but cool water, cool water, cool water, cool water here. This is the Nino 1.2 region. Typically what you see is you'll see cold water or cooler water build here off of Peru. It gets caught by the trade, start pushing off to the east. That's exactly what we're seeing. And if that continues for any length of time, that is the start of La Nina. And that's kind of what we got going on here. Sort of a fading El Nino warm pattern with a stream of cool water, not particularly cool, but cooler, at least according to this, running right through the heart of it, starting to work its way into the Nino 3.4 region. Now we do see over in the West Pacific a lot of warm water over to the dateline, over above New Guinea, but it's really more this area. And the more warming you get off of Peru, the better and stronger and more robust your El Nino is, and the better the odds of it doing things to enhance the jet stream and support storm production. What has been the trend for the past 7 days? Well, you can see it pretty plain as day. Cooling water, like a stream of it trying to build, yeah, little pockets of warm water, but for sure the cooler water is emanating from off Peru over the Galapagos into the East Pacific, and that is, if that continues, then that, I mean, you can get this during good solid inactive phases of the MJO, and La Nina is effectively an enhanced propensity for the inactive phase of the MJO, just like El Nino is the exact opposite. Warming building this area, when you have cooling building this area, that's a good sign of La Nina. And then here is the real teller. This is just the backed off view. Yeah, a lot of warm water all over the place, but you see this just finger of cool water developing here from the Galapagos, moving it towards the Central Pacific. You also see a tiny reflection of that over Africa. Actually, it seems like it starts here and then manifests itself more over here, but could be the other way around. Either way, see it here. That is not El Nino-ish at all. What's the sea surface temperature trend? Well, in the Nino 1.2 area, that region there right up by Peru, Ecuador, that all sort of thing, it's a noisy area. See temperatures today, half a degree, a little bit more, 0.697 below normal. What's the trend been? Well, here's the actual temperature. You can just draw a line through it. It looks like it's steadily downward, suggesting the demise of El Nino. In the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region, pretty much the same deal. Temperatures a tenth of a degree above normal, 0.114. And the trend here, well, you have to be half a degree above normal for 5 months to declare a minimum El Nino, and we just barely reached that threshold. The trend lately, down, 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 just hanging around neutral, so that's not too bad. But let's go take a look at the forecast. But before we do that, a quick look at what's going on in the atmosphere. Does the atmosphere sense that something's happening yet? The ocean can change, but it takes a while for the atmosphere to move. It's like a big boat. It takes a lot of pushing from the ocean to get the atmosphere to respond in kind. So right now, this is one index is the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin. If the pressure is lower over Tahiti, which would be significant or indicative of El Nino, you have a negative, or at least the active phase of the MJO, you'll get a daily negative daily contribution. Today, minus 2.46. That is definitely down from, it's like low pressure is fading relative over Tahiti as compared to, you can see earlier this month. We've been much more negative, but still negative, minus 2.46. 30-day average, minus 12.92. That's pretty good, but that is starting to return towards neutral too. You really want to see this down if you're in El Nino, like minus 15 or 20 and holding. The 90-day average, so this is the real El Nino monitoring thing. It really looks like we're just coming off a active phase of the MJO, but in terms of where are we, this needs to be at minus 12 or 15 to be El Nino. We're at minus 8.34, and you can see we're actually further down than we were a month ago, but still not in El Nino territory. And then finally, the sea surface temperature forecast, the official El Nino monitoring region, Nino 3.4. So where are we today? Mid-July. Per this model, they're projecting temperatures should be about even, and that's about where we are. But the forecast is down to half a degree below normal in October, so that would be the beginning point for reaching the start of a La Nina thing. Going down, this is actually lower than it was even last week, but not as bad as it was 2 days ago. It's about minus 0.65, something like that in January, and then supposedly recovering. I don't believe that for a second. It'll probably sit around here for the next 2 years if we're really moving into a La Nina, and that's what this looks like's happening. That's what the ocean looks like it's doing, and it makes perfect sense given that we've been in El Nino for the better part of 2 years. So probably not a great setup for the coming long-term outlook. So to wrap things up, it looks like, well, the swell machine not doing so great right now. South Pacific pretty much asleep. A little bit of hope here and there. Yeah, tiny southern hemi swell is possible. Even a little pulse, maybe starting Tuesday or Wednesday in Southern California. Not much in Northern California, but maybe something. Wind swell off and on, not unexpected. That's okay. Take what you can get. Longer term beyond that, looks like El Nino is fading. Still, the atmosphere isn't going to totally pick up on it till probably, we're guessing, the Thanksgiving, Christmas time frame sort of deal. So, still probably decent potential for a fall, but then as you get deeper into winter, probably not so much. You know, somewhere around Christmas, the bottom's going to fall out. That's not to say there won't be swells, but generally when you get into this weak kind of La Nina thing, you don't get as many swells. The storms aren't as strong. They don't last as long. So whatever swells you get are kind of here and gone. They don't reach. They tend to be more in the far North Pacific, northern Gulf of Alaska. That makes things difficult for Southern California and down into Baja and that area. Better for the Pacific Northwest. Hawaii? Does okay. It's not great, but, you know, not as bad. But then trades also tend to get enhanced during La Nina for Hawaii. So, things are looking okay for the medium term. But as we get into the next year, we're talking, what, 5 months out? So that's still a ways away. You know, maybe we could be wrong here. But just looking at the tea leaves and looking at how we've seen this go in the past, probably better get what you can get, make the most of it, and be happy for what you get beyond that. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching. And be sure and hit the subscribe button if you want to be notified of future forecasts. There's a little bell next to that. Click that as well. If you like the video, of course, hit the like button. Thank you. See you again next week.